Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call Podcast. My name is James Bolden. I'm the publications editor for the International Horn Society and the host of the Horn Call Podcast. Well, this is a very special episode. It is episode 50 of the Horn Call Podcast, at least in its current iteration. If you're thinking the math doesn't add up, you're not wrong. There have been 50 episodes already, but those were sort of special edition kind of one-offs. In terms of regular episodes, this is our 50th one, and we've got a fantastic guest for you. But before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about the podcast. It's kind of nice to reflect a little bit back on things now that we're in 50 episodes deep here. I hope you enjoy listening to it. If you do, leave us a review online, and definitely more importantly than leaving us a review is to go join the International Horn Society. Go to hornsociety.org, and with a few simple clicks, you can renew or become a brand new member of the IHS, the worldwide community for horn players everywhere. If you've used hornexcerpts.org, if you've read the Horn Call, if you've listened to this podcast, if you've engaged in any way with the Horn Society, if you've played a piece that was commissioned through one of the commissioning initiatives of the IHS, and you may have over the course of your playing career, consider supporting the IHS. It's a wonderful organization. It's my honor to be associated with it. So with that in mind, I want to introduce our amazing guest today, Kate Warren. She is a performer, an educator on the horn and other instruments. She's just got a wealth of great educational material on Instagram and on her website, Kate Warren Music. So we get into all different kinds of things, talking about her career thus far and all of the exciting things that she's doing, and just a wonderful person with lots of great talent and lots of great ideas. We had a really wonderful conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, it's so lovely to have you here today. And so to get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing now with music and the horn, and then maybe kind of go back a little bit and bring us up to this point, and how you got your start in music and inspirations to you along the way. And that's a whole lot of questions in a very short amount of time, but feel free to dive right in.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk about myself and French horn playing. So I'm Kate Warren, and I am a French horn player and a French horn teacher in New Haven, Connecticut, where I run a private music studio teaching French horn trumpet lessons. And I work part-time for a youth orchestra program called Music in the Schools Initiative. And we do both in-school, daytime classroom support for New Haven Public Schools, as well as after-school music ensembles, where I have the privilege of conducting some wind bands, some mariachi, some salsa band, which has really expanded my own musical horizons as a classically trained French horn player in ways that I enjoy a lot. But I didn't start here. I did start on the French horn in the 6th grade, and I did not want to. I wanted to take PE. I really did. I wanted to take PE because all of my friends were taking PE, and my parents, who are both artists, my mom's a painter, my dad is a printmaker, they said, no, you're going to be well-rounded. You are going to do 1 year of band, and then you can quit. But I had to do 1 year of band. That was their requirement. Mm-hmm. So I did 6th grade band. And I really didn't want to be there. I closed my eyes, and I just picked the one that sounded okay. Not a lot of thought went into what instrument I was going to play because I was quitting band after that year.
Right.
And, hindsight is 2020, but that did not happen. I did not quit band after 1 year. I met a lot of really great friends who are still some of my lifelong friends in that band class. I fell in love with music, and it became my career. But I also was not very good at the French horn from the get-go. I made it one semester, and in the spring, my band director, she sat me down and she said, Kate, the French horn is a very difficult instrument, and it might be better for you if you played something that was a little easier. And she suggested I play trumpet, which was the beginning of me actually practicing and actually learning how to play the French horn, because it's not really fun when your teacher tells you you're so bad at something she wants you to quit and do something else. So I don't know if that's why I ended up being just so stubborn about, no, I'm never quitting French horn. I'm going to make it my job. I'll make it my career. I'll show you.
Well, who knows? Maybe there was a little bit of reverse psychology going on there. Who knows?
Whatever it was, it worked. I've run into her a couple times now as a professional musician, and every time she's like, "I'm so sorry I ever said that to you." I'm like, "No, thank you. I needed it. I was not practicing. I did not know my fingerings." So it really was one of the best things she could have done for me.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so did you grow up in Florida?
I did mainly. I'm actually I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
I've lived a lot of places, but I claim Florida as my home. I'm a Floridian. Today in Connecticut, it snowed again. I didn't like it because I'm a Floridian.
Yeah, I'm in Louisiana, so we're similar sorts of weather, although I think it's maybe a tad bit more humid depending on where you are in Florida compared to Louisiana. But so you came up through high school, and then at a certain point, you decided to go into music as, this a career. What was that decision like, going from high school to like wanting to be a music major in college? Because I know that's, especially nowadays with, the obligation financially and the time involved, it's difficult to choose a college major. So what was that process like for you?
Well, so I was not in a big band program. My band was like 55 people, really small. We were not very good. So I know a lot of people sometimes grow up with like these big music programs who send. I am the only musician who has ever come out of my high school band program that I know of up until when I went off to music school. And at the time, like you're in high school, you're trying to figure out what you want to do. And I love music. I love two things. I loved music and I loved math team. Because I was that kind of nerd. I was on the band and the math team. And it really came down to thinking about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was like, well, I can do calculus for the rest of my life, or I can do French horn. And I did go with the French horn, as much as calculus is amazing and I love it. But my parents, because they're both artists, were really helpful in that regard, because I was 17, and they sat me down and had a really honest conversation about what a career in the arts looks like, what finances growing through a career in the arts was going to look like, and the kind of lifestyle and hardships I could expect from that. And, at the time I was like, I'm going to win a job for the New York Philharmonic. I don't care. But now, as this early stage professional that I am, I think back to those conversations, and I'm so glad that my parents talked to me about that. We had a really great, I think they still have a really great scholarship program in Florida called Bright Futures, where if you stay within the state and you have a certain GPA and a certain number of community service hours, college is free. And so I auditioned for conservatories, and I got my acceptances, and I also auditioned at Florida State and the University of Florida, and they came in, and my mom and my dad sat me down and said, "You're going to one of the Florida schools." And I said, "What? No, I want to go to blah, blah, blah." And they were like, "Yes, but this is free. And remember how we talked about how expensive this career is going to be." And again, some of the best advice that they ever gave me was to pick what I considered at the time to be an inferior program, because it was going to help set up my career to launch easier and to be more manageable as I started. I then came to learn, and if Michelle listens to this, I came to learn that Florida State was the absolute best school that I could have gone to for who I am and what I wanted to do. And I had an amazing experience. So even if, for our listeners, if you're not quite sure that a program is going to be the right fit for you, you also have so much to grow through, especially in undergrad. Who knows what your life is going to look like in 4 years.
Or even like next week. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So shout out to Michelle Stebleton, horn professor at Florida State. Yeah, just a huge influence in the horn world. I'm sure she'll listen to this, because I'll be sure to send it to her for one thing. So if that's okay with you, once the podcast goes live. I listened to her episode a couple months ago. Yeah, that was a really fun conversation. I think at some level she understands the impact she has, but it's kind of like, she's really well known. So I don't, there's so many connections and like 3 degrees of separation. Like I never studied with her, but I still feel like she's been a big influence on me just through, indirect relationships and that sort of thing.
She has continued to be an amazing support system and resource for me, even now that I'm 2 degrees past when I was at Florida State. And that's true of the horn world, I think. As a whole, it's like we're so small and we're so interconnected that everyone is involved forever, and it's so great to have these interactions and connections.
Right, absolutely. Well, okay, so yeah, let's kind of go down that path if you don't mind a little bit. So, as you're approaching the end of your time in undergrad as your music performance major.
Music performance. Yes.
Okay, so there's that question of like, okay, what do I do now? Do I go to grad school? If so, where? And then you kind of start the process again, just like as an undergrad of like, there's tons of great programs out there, but what's the right fit for me and based on what you want to do and that sort of thing. Now, the benefit is probably like as about to be a college graduate, you have probably a little bit clearer idea of where you want to go and what you want to do compared to when you were that 17-year-old coming into undergrad. So, yeah, talk a little bit about what led you to Yale.
Yale was not my first stop, actually. It was always made pretty clear to me growing up that graduate school was not a choice. I would be going to graduate school. My brother also went to graduate school. Our parents both went to graduate school. It was kind of a like, this is a thing that we do. So I did not spend a lot of time entertaining the thought that I might not go to graduate school. Uh-huh. But something that I did end up having to consider at the end of my time at Florida State was that I had won some regional orchestra positions and I had a lot of work there. And to go to graduate school, I would likely have to give those all up. And whether or not that income was worth continuing my education. And inevitably I did. I ended up going to the New School and studying with Eric Rolski, the principal horn of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. Because my focus at the time was to be a pit musician, to be an orchestral musician. It was going to put me in downtown New York where those things happened, studying with the guy who was, air quotes, the best in the country at doing that thing, right? And that progression made a lot of sense for me at the time. Not what I'm doing now, because we don't always know where we're going to end up and we don't always know what things are going to shake out to be. But I'm so grateful for the time I studied with him, the experience I had living in New York, and all of what I got out of that situation. After that, I graduated right in the heat during COVID, which was not a very lucrative time to be a freelancer in New York. Right. So I did as many of my age group did, move back in with my parents during COVID because you had to. I had no work, and that was great. It was some time that I would never have gotten otherwise with them. And despite how horrible COVID was, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm so happy I got to be there. So happy I got to have that year and a half with my family again. At one point, it did wear me down a little bit, and I was like, "Okay, we got to get out of Florida again." So I rattled off some very last minute audition tapes, pre-screening tapes for only programs that I knew either had teaching assistantships or were free. Because it's COVID, I just didn't make any money for 2 years. Right. And again, Yale's graduate program is completely endowed, so there's no cost of tuition. There was a very small stipend when I went there, but I just found that the stipend's actually gone quite a bit up, and so now it's pretty comparable to some decent assistantships. Oh wow! So that's really exciting. I think it's $11,000 a year now.
That's pretty good. Yeah,
amazing opportunity for students to come and study for free and get paid a little bit. Right.
And that's William Purvis.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about? I'm sorry. I skipped over the New School part of your academic trajectory. So what about Yale attracted you to it, aside from, of course, it's a fantastic program, it's well known and renowned, and the stipend and the tuition waiver, but was there anything in particular about William Purvis's career or the kinds of things he was doing that led you to that school?
I will break his heart when I say this, but he's not the reason I came to Yale, unfortunately. I'm, again, very grateful for all the time I got to spend learning from him. I learned so much. But I had two big goals in mind, which were not to go in debt, because again, like my family really instilled in me how financial freedom can impact a budding career. So that was a very big priority for me. And then also, I was trying to stay on the East Coast because I built up a good network and some work in New York. I didn't think I quite wanted to move back to the city, but I wanted to be close enough, and New Haven's a 2-hour train right away. Close enough that I could still have all of the feelers I had before I left.
Right. Well, and that, I'm sure that put you in good stead when things started to open back up.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, for people who are familiar with you, they probably know you most through your social media, Instagram. You have a website, katewarrenmusic.com, and you have some really great publications out there, which I want to definitely get to. But when did putting your energies towards like advocating for there's a lot of stuff on social media. We could go on and on about like, there's some misinformation out there and then just some plain like toxic things out there. Now, luckily we're somewhat insulated in the classical music realm, but we're not immune to it. But like your Instagram channel and the stuff that you put out there is all really good quality, and it's vetted, and it's like, I would recommend it to anybody. So, what kind of made you want to put your energies towards doing that kind of thing?
Firstly, thank you for that compliment.
You're welcome.
Many of our listeners don't know, you can find me anywhere on the internet at Kate Warren Music. So that's katewarrenmusic.com, at Kate Warren Music on all of the social platforms. And I put out namely educational content for French horn players and classical musicians. And I always cite my sources. As you just said, I always cite my sources. So I have to cite my very first source, which is the influence and who and why I ended up going in the trajectory I went with my social media, which is Dr. John Ericson's blog, hornmatters.com, because that shaped my high school experience. I was in band and the math team. There was a point where I had read every single one of the articles on his blog. And it was definitely over 1,000 at that point, but I had read all of them. I had like the email notification every time a new one went up. Yeah. I was in a really small band program with not a lot of resources, not a lot of talent in our area. And it was incredibly influential in how I got music information and how I grew as a musician. And so I began making Kate Warren music. Just to start having some kind of online presence when I was freelancing in New York. I launched my website and my socials at the same time, and that was on purpose. It was January 1st of 2020, and it was my New Year's resolution.
That's pretty cool. So this was like, I think people had probably heard of the novel coronavirus at that point, but certainly in the months and weeks to come. Yeah, right.
Quotes began.
Right.
And it was just to start kind of networking with New York freelancers, and also because I had all these practice videos on my phone, and I wasn't watching any of them. I would make them. I had the dedication and the fortitude to make them, but I did not have the emotional strength to watch them.
It's very tough. Yeah.
New Year's resolution was a deal with myself that I had to post 2 videos of my playing a week. And I don't know about you, but I'm not in the business of putting a video I haven't listened to up on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it became a tool to help me improve my playing and improve my practice through. Obviously, that evolved a lot over the course of the next 2 years and eventually turned into what is now the educational resource of at Kate Warren Music, which is heavily influenced by Horn Matters blog and that realm of like heavily vetted cited research, actual things about music, not just like, these are my feelings.
Right. Or
feelings. Yeah. Nothing wrong with feelings, but information is so valuable. And in the way that Horn Matters, a blog, and I listened to a podcast called the Mellowcast, which was
I did too. Yeah. Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
In the way that those resources were really impactful for me as a young musician, I'm hopeful that this new platform, right? Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, that a lot of our young people are on, is reaching them and is able to influence them in the same regards that I received so much free information as a child.
No, that's great. That's fantastic. And I'm in mid-career and also middle age, so I've kind of like got a foot in both worlds, and so I see how important social media is to younger people, and it's one thing so if I'm wearing my hat of like being the older person, I'd be like, well, if you don't like it, just don't be on social media. Just don't engage if you find it making you feel less good about yourself. But then taking off the old person hat, I'm like, yeah, but it's easy to say that, but people are very tied to their social media, and they make friends all over the world and follow things all over the world. And to just say, well, you have to give that up. That's like, that would be a huge blow.
Of the modern era.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And especially in terms of like professional networking and that sort of thing, it's huge. And, it varies depending on the field, but certainly like classical music, people talk about your videos. They talk about, things they saw on TikTok, and they'll come and ask me as students, will say, well, can I learn that piece? I heard, so-and-so play this on, YouTube or Instagram. So I think it can be a force for good, but, so getting around to my question, do you have any advice for, creating a successful social media presence without, while avoiding some of the pitfalls of, the getting into the toxic nature of some things and that sort of thing?
I think for our current time and the way that we are currently using social media, and I use that word current because it's not going to be this way forever. It was not always this way. Who knows if it's going to be more or if it's going to disappear? Who knows what happens in the future? But for now, it really is important for all musicians to have some kind of online footprint. I mean, you and I met on Instagram when you saw a carousel about mellophone playing.
Right.
And that's the only reason that you know who I am. And you don't have to be the Kate Warren music, the Scott Legier horn, the Alana B. Duden. You don't have to do that at that scale and that scope to have enough of a online footprint to help people know who you are. Just like it does not have to be the end all be all. It is okay if it is just good enough. If it is just every once in a while, like as long as there is something out there that helps people know who you are and what you do, that is enough for people to check those two boxes.
Exactly. Well, and I remember, so like back when I was coming up, it was, just create a website and put your name on there and put a few things about yourself and then kind of like set it and forget it. And that's not the way people engage with the internet or social media now. It's about, okay, what's the new thing that you've got, or what series of things have you started? So, how do you come up with your ideas for content, and how do you keep motivated to keep producing things, I guess would be the question too.
It can become, as we were just talking about avoiding, it can become all consuming. And I try really hard to kind of plan things out. I do a lot of content prepping, content batching, which is where I sit down and I make a lot of stuff. Like lately I've been putting up repertoire lists for all the concertos written by women composers for all the brass instruments. And I did all of those at once. I made all of them at once, and thankfully they're coming out every couple of days, every 4 or 5, so they'll last me a while. But if I had to sit down every 2 days, because I post every other day, if I had to sit down every 2 days and make a quality piece of content, I would not have time to teach quality lessons and have quality practice time and have quality me time and exercise and cook, right? While I do consistently show up on all of my social media platforms, do not be fooled to think that means I am consistently on them. I think today, like the past couple of weeks, I've been really bad about putting up stories. So today I put up that it was snowing and I went and got donuts before this. So I put a picture of my donuts, right? It's enough. And that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to always be the absolute best. And I think that translates to a lot of things we do in music too, especially for our music school students who are drowning, who are overwhelmed, who have way too much on their plates, that sometimes it is okay to do just enough.
Well, and one thing I often talk about, and I think students get the misconception that, so we talk about time management, right? Which is like probably one of the most critical skills of, being a musician or artist, is just knowing where to put your efforts and knowing, well, if I put effort on the front end of this now, then it'll pay off later, and just kind of figuring out how all that works. And some students think, well, I'm bad at time management, so I'll just never get good at it. But it is a skill that one can learn. Were you always good at that, or did you have to learn some things along the way?
I am a little naturally inclined for the administrative parts of life. I'm very grateful for it. It's not something I struggle with. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything better than that.
Well, I try to get students into to sort of look at themselves and be realistic with themselves and be like, well, okay, so if you struggle with time management, figure out what you're most when is your optimum time to do this task? Like, when are you best at practicing? When are you worst at practicing? And just kind of knowing yourself, I think is can
help you put things where they need to be on the calendar that they help you the best.
Yeah. And to be, I'm kind of like you in that way. It's like I get excited about the planning part of it. It's not something I dread. It's like, as soon as I am aware of a task, I'm like, okay, I got to get started on. That's sort of my thing, is like, I stress on the front end because I'm eager to start it. And then once it's done and off and going, I stress less about it. But then some people they do the opposite of that. They don't stress about it at all right away. And then they wait till 2 days before it's due to start stressing about it, which I think is funny.
Perhaps something that I'm not good at in the realm of time management and keeping our schedules is being protective about the time that I've put aside for things. I very easily will pack my schedule full with things and then take a look at it and be like, I have no time to practice today. I have to slam in 15 minutes between every lesson and call it work that was productive for me. And that's a skill that I work on myself. Like I've started scheduling time I'm not allowed to work. So it's in my calendar and it's in green and it has the girl with this hands emoji and it says no work.
Oh, I love that.
These blocks of time when I know that this past weekend, like I played Easter gigs all weekend. So Monday morning had a big open chunk of time. And then, everybody wants a lesson. Everybody wants it, whatever. And it was like, no work, because I needed to rest, because I needed to recover from the onslaught of March.
That's really smart. Well, I was going to say, and if we're getting too far into the weeds on this, feel free to stop me. We can go in a different direction. But I did not take any classes in like audio production or video production or anything like that. I mean, everything I've learned has just been kind of like watching other people and kind of picking it up on the side. But one thing that strikes me about all of your content, it's really, really well done. Like your eye for videography and lighting and all of that stuff I think that's one thing that sets your stuff apart from just kind of the run of the mill. Somebody took a video on their cell phone and threw it up on whatever platform. How did you learn to make your stuff look so professional?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All of my stuff is filmed on my cell phone, by the way. I am mainly self-taught. Again, I have 2 artist parents, so I kind of grew up in an art gallery, getting told what looked good and what didn't look good.
Oh.
But that's like, just because I have a decent eye doesn't mean I knew how to use the Adobe suite. Doesn't mean I knew how to edit video and edit audio and make all the graphics. I make all my graphics on Canva because I find it a little more freedom than some of the other tools you can use for that. But I had to learn all of those skills. I remember during COVID, I decided I was going to make a multi-track. I was going to make an 8-track thing, which then meant I had to learn how to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just from the audio standpoint. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this for the video too. I remember sitting there for days watching Adobe Premiere Pro tutorials.
Right. Yeah.
And now, I've learned that skill. Now it's like, oh, I film something on my phone. I film it in 4K, but TikTok wants it in 1080p. So I put it on my laptop and it's like, done.
Yeah.
And it exports for longer than the time I spent doing it. But I did have to watch those tutorials and learn how to do that, because we don't learn in music school how to do these things.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Well, and so that leads me to this part of it. So we were talking about, advice you would give to up and coming musicians and advice you might give to them. And one way I like to structure the question to guests is, what would you tell your younger self, or what are some things that you wish you'd known going into this that you didn't know at the outset? If you could go back in time and tell, 17 or 18-year-old you kind of at the outset of this, here's some stuff that you really need to know going into it so you don't have to learn it the hard way.
17 and 18-year-old Kate Warren needs to take days off. She needs to not think playing for 90 days straight is a cool, honorable thing that people should be jealous of, and take time off for starters.
Yep.
I think, and maybe that can be extrapolated to all of it, is music takes time. Music career takes time and is rushed. And I say this now, knowing the phone call I had with my mother like 2 days ago, being like, I'm so behind in life. Like, it takes time. And it is going to happen. You are going to get better at your instrument. Your foundations and fundamentals are going to improve. You are going to get that job. You are going to go to graduate school, however that shows up for you. Be a little less scared of it not happening. Because if you're scared of it not happening, you're already doing enough work for it to happen. You care enough for it to be, the wheels are already turning for you. And to just take some time and enjoy being where you're at in life. Enjoy what you have, enjoy what you've accomplished at the moment, instead of taking one gold star and going, wait, I need 8 more, and celebrating it.
Yeah. Taking time to smell the roses, or to appreciate, where you are. Yeah.
And just be happy with it. You can be happy with where you're at and also want to be somewhere else at the same time. And that is possibly the best advice I could give even current me, because I still feel all those same things. I still have all those same fears.
Yeah. Well, and again, going back to the social media thing, it's so easy with the way it's structured to just like to compare yourself to the 90,000 other people out there doing the exact same thing that you want to do, trying to fill the exact same, spot in the market that you are. That gets me down too sometimes. And I know myself well enough to be like, okay, I need to take a break from this and not try to compare myself to everyone else doing the same thing I am.
Well, and social media makes it so easy to get jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're only seeing the best of someone's career. No one is telling you about all the wrong notes they played this week. No one is telling you about all the gigs they didn't get called back to,
right,
or the papers that were rejected, right? You're seeing all of their wins. And when you're only looking at someone's highlight reel, it's really easy to get jealous of that and to ignore your highlight reel and think about all the things you didn't have a negative word here.
Right, yeah.
And I do that too. I see other people's successes sometimes and I get a little jealous and I go, hey, you need to be happy for them, Kate. Stop it.
No, that's smart. Yeah, that's really smart. And it's also the thing of like, there's not a finite amount of success. Just because one person has success doesn't mean now your piece of the pie is smaller. I think I stole that from Jeff Nelson, and I'm sure he probably borrowed it from someone else. But sorry, Jeff, if I stole that from you. But no, it makes a lot of sense. But it is that trap of certain personalities, mine. Sometimes that leads me down that path of like, oh, that I wish I'd thought of that first or whatever. So it's interesting. And that's really good advice though, to just check yourself from time to time and be happy with where you are and what you're doing. Let's see. Oh, how about you mentioned mellophone, because I guess our first contact was when we were talking about you writing an article on mellophone for the horn call. So it's not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. Mellophone is a reality of being a horn player.
Horn podcast.
I know, right? Hopefully we didn't lose too many listeners, but so yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that? You'd mentioned that kind of early on, you got maybe asked to possibly switch to trumpet, but you doubled down on your horn playing. But at some point along the way, you developed these mellophone chops, which are like, really, really great too. So what was that path like? I know looking at your bio, you spent a lot of time doing DCI, drum corps. And if that's something you want to share and talk about too, we can certainly do that.
Yeah. Like many, I got to high school band and we had a marching band. And I had to do it. There was not a don't do it option. We were a 55-piece band. You had to be in marching band.
Yep.
And I had to play mellophone. That was the instrument we had. We had two of them. Actually, I spent 1 year playing the one marching horn that lived in our attic because we had 3 mellophone players and only 2 mellophones. And then the next year we bought some more. But I learned mellophone because they told me I needed to. And I think it was my senior year of high school. One of our band directors, good friends, another band director in the county, he was teaching at the Crossman, and he came to he was helping our marching band rehearsals, and he was like, "Oh, Kate, you should audition for the Crossman." And I was like, haha, no. Because I was not a huge DCI nerd, but one of my best friends, actually, he knocked on my door one day, he said, "Get in the car, bring your mellophone." And I was like, it's Saturday. He goes, "Yeah, we'll come back tomorrow." and I was like, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to be back on Sunday." And I got in the car, and I was like, "What are we doing?" He goes, "We're auditioning for the Boston Crusaders." And again, like he's one of my best friends, and I was just like, "Okay, man, you want to do it? Let's go do it." And we went, and we both got contracts, and we marched the Boston Crusaders that year. And he actually ended up going to the cadets the next year, who just folded, which is really unfortunate. But I marched 2 years at Boston, and then 2 more years at Carolina Crown until I aged out, and it was some of the most formative musical experiences that I had. So obviously I did, for those who don't know, the age out year, you can march drum course when you turn 21. So the 4 years that I marched were all summers that I was going to college the next year. So the summer before I started college, and then the 3 summers after that. So they played a huge role in my early development as a musician. Maybe a little bit to Michelle's disdain that I came back every year sounding like mellophone. But we got through it because mellophone does not destroy you as a French horn player. And I think I probably learned more about being a musician and learned more musicianship skills from my drum corps experiences than I ever would have learned sitting at home with the French horn those summers.
Right. Well, and then certainly like, just the visual aspect and the performance aspect to drum corps in and of itself is, I think that's what attracts people about it. Maybe just like the general public, they're like, sure, there's the good corps sound really good and they have all of the things that we stress in brass pedagogy, resonant sound and good intonation, all fundamentals and all of that stuff. But it's like there's a visual impact to it that is really important because we hear with our eyes a lot of times. Like we can't discount the visual element in a performance.
Well, it's a show, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just a performance, and I think that's what makes the pageantry arts, is what we call like drum corps and winter guard and mm-hmm. all those things. That's what makes the pageantry arts similar, more so, to Broadway and opera mm-hmm. than to classical music, as we'd call the sit-down concert. Because mm-hmm. all of those performances have visual elements supporting and uplifting the musical components that they have. And it's what, again, like I was hoping to be an opera player because something I really loved about playing in opera pits was being a part of this bigger performance that,
exactly,
brings me personally, doesn't have to bring you or any listener, brings me a little more fulfillment, is being a part of that product. Mm-hmm. And so after marching for 4 summers, I taught 5 years of drum corps. And this year will be the first year that I don't do that because mm-hmm. I am going to Japan to tour with the Broadway show Blast.
Oh, nice.
A little drum corps show on the stage inside. And I'm so excited to reconnect with that. Like, just like you were talking about, that element of performance while playing, that element of show, of product, of more than just buttons and black on a page.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
I'm really excited for that.
Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, talk a little bit about what Blast is, because I only have just kind of the most general knowledge of it, but I have heard it described as like marching band meets Broadway or something like that.
So if you've seen the Blue Man Group, that's where I want you to start. I don't want mm-hmm. you thinking of like Kinky Boots or anything. Think of the Blue Man Group, get rid of the blue face paint, and take the drums away and make them all brass instruments. Mm-hmm. So it's a stage show just like that. Like, you're seeing the music get made with the movement. So it's mm-hmm. unlike a regular Broadway show where the musicians are in the pit or on the stand. The musicians are the show. We mm-hmm. will have drill. We will have choreography. There will be some, I don't know what the actual term for them in this production is, but you can call them color guard members. They'll have mm-hmm. silks and rifles and all of those elements are just like you would see in a marching band show or in a drum corps show. Mm-hmm. Except it's staged onto a set, just like a Broadway show would be, and performed in like a theater venue, just mm-hmm. like a Broadway show would be.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And that you get to go to Japan too.
Oh, yeah, I'm really excited. I've never been to Japan before. I'm learning Japanese right now. It's going very poorly.
I'm based on what little I know about you, I think you're going to be just fine at it. You seem like you're going to just dive right in and be great. So I was going to ask you, what's coming up for you and what are you excited about? But that's really cool. Let's see. Was there other stuff?
Well, and so for this, if you're an interested mellophone player, I'll play both French horn and mellophone. It's a mm-hmm. fantastic opportunity to do both. So I won't be entrenched in just mellophone land. I'm actually playing more French horn than I'll play mm-hmm. mellophone. But I do get to do both. And again, that's going to be so fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one thing. So I'm kind of in the middle. I have spoken to people who are really not about drum corps for whatever their reasons are. And then I've spoken to people who are, 1,000% drum corps for whatever their reasons are. And I never did it, but I do understand that there are some phenomenal musicians who do it and they benefit greatly from it. And, the pedagogy in, the best brass captions are great brass pedagogues. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. So I have no complaints from that side of it at all. But it's one of those things. It's like, yes, there's good and bad to be taken from it. So how did you keep your horn chops going, or how did you get your horn chops back after, a summer of drum corps?
The second one is the accurate portrayal. Well, and I think a lot of the camps of people who have this negative opinion of drum corps come from teachers who hear their students the first day they come back and go, "Oh, that's horrifying." Mm-hmm. Well, of course it is. You're expecting to hear a classical concert sound, and they just spent 3 months perfecting a different sound, right? It's not that it's a bad sound. It's a different skill set. It's a different sound. Mm-hmm. The way we play to project and to blend with an ensemble on a marching band field to a stadium
Right.
Because we're not just performing in the concert hall. We're performing in like massive 100-person or 100,000 people stadiums. Like that is a different type of brass playing than the orchestra hall. And to answer your question, I did not keep my French horn chops up while I was on the road because I played mellophone every single day for 89 days. How could I? Right? And I sounded bright when I came back for like 2 weeks. And then it started to go away, and I started to remember all of the things that I wanted in my sound as I retrained my ears and reframed my sound concept for the concert hall. And it didn't cripple me. It just took time to step back into those shoes. Like anything, if you step away from running for a while and you try to get back into running, you're not going to start with a marathon. You're going to start with a mile. And
exactly.
A couple weeks later, you've got the 5K and you'll be fine in the long run.
No, that's good. I was gonna say, so this sort of leads me to, I guess this might be a good way to kind of wrap things up. And the one thing I haven't mentioned is you were speaking of getting back in shape. And I know that you've got a really great new publication out there about getting back in shape. This would be good for maybe horn players who've taken a bunch of time off, or maybe who have done a lot of mellophone or other instrument playing and are looking to get their horn concept, their horn sound concept, and their horn chops back. So there's that. And then you also have a warm-up routine, and those are both available on your website. So I have both of those, and they're really great. So what made you want to put some of this stuff in writing and go to the trouble and the time it takes to get something like that out there?
Yes, thank you. I have 2 books. One is a 3-week boot camp to get your face back in shape, and one is my personal fundamentals routine. And rewinding all the way back to the beginning of this episode, that influence I have from Dr. Ericson about creating accessible resources and easy to find information. Both my books are $15. They're only available in a PDF. There's not a hard copy, because that's how the cost stayed low, right? If I had to print that book, it got expensive. And if it gets expensive, people can't afford it and people can't buy it. So the reason I put the time into making those resources was so that people could have them, so that they could have, like, I have thousands of exercises that just live in my brain rent free and take up the place where things like my grocery list and my parents' phone numbers should live. And so putting them down, engraving them, and making them available to other people to have, who maybe they're not in college. Maybe they don't have access to a private teacher. Maybe they don't have access to anything, right? And it creates an opportunity for them to have some exercises to play, to have some information on how to approach them, some information on how to get back in shape. And honestly, I think everything that I do in the public sphere is really to just try to improve access to music education. That, like, if I were to say, like, here's the flag that I'm sticking to the ground and I'm standing on this, I want to improve access to music education. It's so important. It's so vital.
That's great. Well, Kate, thanks so much for speaking with me today. This has been a really awesome conversation.
Yes, thank you for having me again.